Got a great question the other day that I wanted to answer on video because there's a lot of confusion around this topic. The question was, should I wear a weightlifting belt and when? All right, so first things first, wearing a weightlifting belt is absolutely not necessary, okay? So if the goal is to be fit and strong in real life, then the weightlifting belt is not necessary at all. So our goal in CrossFit is to build functional fitness, functional strength, okay? And so when we talk about strength in CrossFit, our definition of strength is the productive application of force. And so what we're talking about really is, in real life, I want to be prepared if I have to lift something up off the ground. I want to be prepared if I have to squat down on the ground and then lift something up from the ground. None of those situations in real life are going to give me a chance to pause and go grab my weightlifting belt before I deal with the situation, right? If I have an elderly family member that needs to be lifted up off the ground, I can't tell that person, hold on, let me just get my weightlifting belt. So not necessary to build real functional strength, because a big question I might ask somebody is, hey, that's great that you just did that, but your technique is garbage. Let's take the weight belt off and see, can you do that without the weight belt? And so the problem with the weight belt a lot of times is people use it, the weight belt and other kind of supporting devices, wrist wraps, knee sleeves, that kind of stuff. They see somebody, what generally happens with folks is they come into the gym, they see somebody that they think is strong or fit, that person's wearing this particular device, using this piece of equipment, whatever, and they think, oh, well, that person's in really good shape. They're lifting a lot of weight, I must need one of these things. And so then they go out and get one, right? The problem that leads to is a couple of things. First of all, a lot of people are not using these devices the right way. And number two, it ends up serving as Band-Aids or cover-up. They end up serving as Band-Aids or cover-ups for poor technique. And our priority is always technique, 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 okay? So, are they necessary? No. Would I rather be able to lift 200 pounds off the ground without a weight belt? Yes, okay? Now, that being said, they do have a time and a place, and I should say, in spirit of full disclosure, I wear one sometimes. It's definitely in my gym bag, but a really kind of way I look at it is I try to pull it out as little as possible. When I'm squatting, when I'm deadlifting, pressing even sometimes, I try to use it as little as possible, okay? Because the stronger I can get without the use of any supporting equipment, the better. That being said, my personal kind of line in the sand is when I get close to my maximum weight, the maximum I know I'm able to lift, when I'm within like 90% of that number, 85, 90% of that number, I'll go ahead and pull the belt out. Or when it's very high volume, okay? But really, even then, I'm gonna try to avoid using the belt as much as I can, and I really will just make the decision on the spot, do I feel like I need a belt today? Because the more I can do without it, the better, frankly. Now, that being said, if you wanna use a belt, it's important that we're using it right, okay? So the first thing that a lot of people don't realize is using a weightlifting belt is not just about wrapping this around our waist and strapping it down as tight as we can. So what we want to think about first of all, before we ever get into talking about the weight belt, is breathing and bracing, okay? Think of your abdominal cavity as a can, all right? And I can't take credit for this illustration, other people have used it, but it's very applicable. Think of your abdominal cavity as a can. Okay, think about 2 cans of O2, let's say, for instance. A full can of O2 with the lid sealed and an empty can of O2 with the lid popped. Which of those cans, if we were to set those on the ground next to each other and I was to stand on each of those, which of those cans is more likely able to resist my weight standing on it? The full can, right? Because it's sealed and there's a bunch of pressure built up inside the can that is sealed. The can that is empty is not sealed, there's no pressure inside, so it's gonna crush as soon as I stand on top of it. We wanna think of our abdominal cavity in a similar manner when we're breathing. What my goal should be is to learn to breathe and brace properly. So at the top of a lift, I breathe in nice and deep. I fill my entire abdominal cavity, not my belly. We don't wanna talk about belly breathing. We're talking about diaphragmatic breathing. We're filling our entire abdominal cavity up with air, creating a cylinder, just like that can, that's sealed at the top, nice and stable, and is really ready now to safely carry load, okay? Once I learn how to breathe properly, then I can add the belt as just a little bit of extra help building that pressure, maintaining that pressure. Now, the way we know how to breathe properly is, first of all, when I'm breathing, we can do what we call the sandwich test. So I put my hands on my side just like this. My goal is when I take my deep breath in, I want to push out against my fingers. So I press out as I inhale, Now what's happening is I am not breathing into my stomach and sticking my stomach out like I just had too much to eat. I'm filling up my entire abdominal cavity. Okay, and as I'm taking that deep breath, I'm breathing out into those two fingers that I've got squeezed around in the front, on the sides of my gut there. Okay, now I take that deep breath, I squeeze out into these points, I do my rep, and then depending on the situation, I take another breath and start all over at the top of the next rep. Okay, once I get good at that, now I can add the weight belt, all right? And so again, the weight belt is just gonna serve, once I've learned how to fill that can up with air, seal it, and give myself good pressure inside the cylinder of my abdominal cavity, now what I can do is use my belt. A couple things. First of all, again, this is not just about strapping this down as tight as I want, as tight as I possibly can. First of all, as far as position goes, this is a little bit, your mileage may vary. Typically, we're gonna go somewhere in the neighborhood of our belly button, so not around our waist, around our belly button, maybe even a little bit higher, depending just kind of on your body lengths and things like that, your body geometry. Then we're gonna strap it down. It is tight, but not too tight. It needs to be tight, but not so tight that I can't take that deep breath in. The whole point of this belt is when I take my deep breath in and I'm breathing out into those 2 points, I'm breathing out now into the to the belt, which is giving me a little bit extra stability, okay? So I'm using my abdominal cavity to build good pressure that now will help me lift, and now I'm just gonna add this weight belt to give me a little bit of extra assistance in maintaining a bunch of pressure here in my core, right? This is not about protecting your back. This is not, if your back hurts, putting on a weight belt is not gonna help, okay? So keep that in mind. One more thing, we'll talk about a similar thing when it comes to wrist wraps, all right? So remember when it comes to wrist wraps are about, these are like supposed to be like a cast. When they're wrapped around our wrist, they're meant to provide stability to our wrist and help us keep our wrist straight, okay? So we don't go into too much extension, we keep nice and straight. Now, just like belts, wrist wraps can serve a purpose. I own wrist wraps. I use them in appropriate occasions. But what we don't want to do is skip over the important piece, strengthening our wrist, and going directly to the wrist wraps. Because at some point, all you've done is give yourself a Band-Aid to cover up weak wrists, and now you've set up the situation where you can't ever lift anything without wrist wraps. We need to, wrist wraps are okay, but we don't want to forget just strengthening our wrists, all right? You come into the gym, people come into the gym, they haven't lifted weights in a long time, maybe ever. They start pressing weight overhead, and their wrists start to get sore. That doesn't mean something's wrong. It just might mean, just like your legs are sore the first time you do squats in a while, your wrists haven't done that in a while, and they got to get used to it. We have to strengthen them. So technique is important, but we also just need to make sure we're strengthening our wrists. We don't want to go directly to adding a Band-Aid onto them that never really gets fixed because we just put that Band-Aid on every time we got to use our wrists. So we can stretch our wrists on front squat day, on front rack day, on push-up day, strengthen our wrists. As long as we're not losing sight of doing all those things, wraps can be okay, belts can be okay in the right situation. All right, guys, hopefully that answers your question. Let me know if you have any more in person, and I'll see you soon.